Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our training, Prevention Storytelling for Impact. My name is Jennifer Jacobson. I'm with TTAS, the Technical Training Assistance Service Center of Connecticut, along with my colleague, Ken Plard, and our two esteemed guest trainers today, Anna and Charisse. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to you two and introduce yourselves and get us started today. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Good morning. Hi, everyone. I am going to just put, I know, actually, I'll wait till we have a few more people in here, before I throw this in the chat. I have a present button. I don't have a share button, Jen. Oh, there it is. Okay, right. Okay, like everyone can see that. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to Prevention Storytelling for Impact.
Everyone, my name is Charisse Hannah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
we hear
great.
you.
So before we formally introduce ourselves, we just wanted to share this quote from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that is really the message that we will share in our storytelling and prevention presentation today.
So doing a little bit of introductions. My name is Anna Gazinski. I am a certified prevention specialist and have been a prevention specialist in Connecticut for over 10 years, working locally, regionally, and also statewide.
My name is Charisse Hannah, as I said earlier, and I am the co-founder of Feel the Future Community Health Coaching and Consulting, and I sit at the intersection of arts and advocacy. So I am a playwright and documentary filmmaker. In addition, I am involved in community health education and have been in human services for over 15 years.
So to start off, we wanted everyone to just kind of jump in the chat, introduce yourselves, put your name, organization, coalition. And we know on the flyer we had put that we really wanted people to come sort of prepared with their vision, mission, or an outcome. So we would like that to also go into the chat with your introduction. So just thinking about what's one win or one outcome that you want to focus on today. I'm not seeing, oh, there we go. All right. Okay. Thank you, Mary Kay. So as we start to get in people's introductions, I sort of wanted to give a preface for Charisse and I when it comes to our organizations and then our outcomes and wins. And one of the reasons why we are working together on this particular workshop is really kind of looking, and Sharice didn't even do a real introduction for herself, but coming into this lens of storytelling as in the prevention field. So we know that we are pretty outcome based, which is why we're asking you to come with an outcome. And one of the projects that Sharice and I worked on very closely happened to be storytelling from a prevention standpoint, a recovery standpoint, a harm reduction standpoint, when it came to the addiction crisis, especially in our Black and Brown communities. And so our our backgrounds together really shaped the documentary Silence on the Streets, which provided the data piece, which is pretty much what we get in prevention, and then Sharice being the esteemed playwright that she is, to really frame storytelling around that data and what does it look like and what does it look like to humans, and showing that connection of how we can interpret data with a personal feel. So I see a lot of people just putting in their names, some coming in with their outcomes. So bridging the gap, moving forward in overdose prevention. We have here qualitative data, sparking prevention and wellness work in the community. Okay. Sharing the success of our vape quick kit dissemination in our region. That's a really great one. Okay, yep, wave to an our own horn, taking credit for success. Okay, so now that I think we have almost everyone admitted, I'm gonna throw in a prevention story checklist into the chat as a PDF. So we want everyone to sort of download that. This is a resource that we have created for this workshop, but also we're gonna kind of use some of the components in it throughout the morning. So also I'm going to preface it, please have pen and paper ready because we are going to make you do a little bit of workshopping today, especially with your win sentence and your mission and vision. So I'm going to throw that in now. Okay. Okay, so starting off, this is a sentence that we want everyone to finish. So storytelling and prevention feels blank. So now there are two ways that you can do this. So first, we are going to allow, if you are on your computer, to use the Zoom feature to annotate. So if you go to your kind of your bar with all of your functions on it, there should be, you may have to hit more, there should be an annotate button. And you can choose to write on the screen, or you can just choose to finish the sentence in the chat, whichever is easier for you. And this can be good, bad, it could be scary, it could be any any verbs or adjectives that you can think of. Okay, we have daunting. Complicated but impactful. So many possibilities. Exciting. Unique, expansive. Vulnerable, personalized. These are all really great. Yeah, so for those that do feel like it's daunting or maybe intimidating, we hope that today's workshop will sort of give you a little bit of a framework to start to tell the story or start to use your data and outcomes in a more of a storytelling fashion.
I'd like to highlight what Will posted. He put individualized. I
Mm.
really, really love that. Our whole goal is to humanize the data. So that's it's a great word. Really love that.
So, with that finish the sentence, we wanted to launch our first poll. So just kind of to get a feeling of who we have and sort of where everyone is at. How comfortable do you feel telling stories about your prevention work? You can say very comfortable, somewhat, not very comfortable, or not comfortable at all.
Answers are still coming in, so I'll give everyone a second. Okay, looks like everyone's done. Can you see the results?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it looks like, you know, a little bit less than half, but a preponderance of our audience today feels very comfortable with prevention storytelling and do this often. So on the middle of the road, about a third of us feeling that they're somewhat comfortable, but tend to overthink it. And some saying that they are not very comfortable and tend to stick to some data, but no one said that they were not comfortable at all. So good to know who's with us today and the different experiences that people have had in their comfort with prevention storytelling for our presenters today. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really glad that no one feels that it's intimidating, especially because given your nature of your work, we all have something to start with. So I think that that's a really positive thing from that poll. All right.
Great. So we'll jump into what storytelling is. So there are, of course, style, structure, approaches, and the different audiences within our field. So as far as styles and structures go, the personal narrative and lived experience may be the angle that you would focus on. Event-based and reflective storytelling, there's prevention-centered story framing, there's meaning making and insight development. So just finding the small things to expound upon and find gems within the small moments. And then there are different approaches. So there could be for prevention and early intervention. It could center resilience, agency, and protective factors, could be grounded in cultural awareness and community context, and could transform lived experience into insight and action. And some of our audiences may be youth and young adults, community members, educators, and facilitators, and helping professionals and prevention and public health audiences, and of course, also funders. Um, and something that we'll touch on later on in our slides will be the ethics that we would need to make sure that we include when we are shaping stories.
So we're gonna hit you with a second poll. But when sharing outcomes and prevention work, what do you usually lead with? So is it your activities, what you did? Is it your outputs, your number, your data, your outcomes? So that's your long-term impact. A mix of those three. It depends on the audience, or I am not sure.
Sorry, everybody, just give me a second. I'm trying to get to our polls. Okay, got it. Okay, looks like everybody's answered. And here are your results.
Perfect.
Most doing a mix of all three. A little bit less on outputs and quantitative, it seems as though for our audience today. And some are tailoring it to that audience. So that's what that looks like today. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. It's very interesting that no one selected just outputs, but I'm gonna assume it's because we do the mix of all three. But typically activities and outputs go very hand in hand, especially when, as prevention professionals, we are posting things on social media or trying to get information about an event or something that we had conducted. So starting off with sort of what we have, right? So I wanted to start by reframing something that we use every single day. We use work plans, we use logic models, we use reports. Those are things that are just sort of embedded into our work as prevention and public health professionals. But something that we may not realize is that that is really our story blueprint, right? So we're not really learning anything new here. We're just going to learn kind of how to translate what we already do and have. So in prevention storytelling, it is about being creative, but we don't have to be dramatic. So really understanding about what pieces of work fit together, and what people actually follow and care about. So the crux of our blueprint is our vision and mission. It's really the why. This is the emotional anchor of our story, and this is the part that really answers, why does this work exist at all? So one of the reasons why that is the core part of our existence is we really want to show people the why. So if we don't have a why, it can often feel transactional, like, okay, we did this, so what, right? We hosted a community forum, so what? And that's where our vision and mission really anchors why we're doing what we're doing. And it helps people understand why we're working, what we're working towards, and why we're doing it. And it's not just, an activity that, we're funding or we're putting on. So then we look at our goals, which oftentimes we also have. Sometimes they are grant specific, sometimes they're organization specific, funding specific, but we do have them. So we would call that the plot. So this is where our stories start to move. They give us direction. Our objectives give us direction based on what we're going to do as a coalition or organization. So using that as showing the problem that we're trying to solve or the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Without our goals, the outcomes in the stories may feel random. It may just feel like more of a laundry list or a grocery list of activities that don't really connect to each other. So these goals give us a purpose, and they tell the audience what's at stake. So I'm going to kind of frame it into prevention. So our examples, some of them may be increasing perception of harm, strengthening protective factors, and reducing risk to exposure of substances or other things. So these root causes or these goals are really the things that are harder to see, right? So that's why when we name them in our story, it really helps people understand what success even looks like from a prevention work standpoint. And one of the things I also want to sort of preface with this, these are core aspects of our coalition or organization that we as the people working or doing the work know. And it's really important to also know that that's really our kind of our roots in the ground, rather than it has to be something that everyone has to have memorized and know, right? Because sometimes in storytelling or when we're talking about our prevention and coalition work, it may feel far for people to resonate and understand, because we are being so technical, or we're saying our mission is, and we're saying it verbatim, right? So really kind of just using it as the roots in our ground and kind of what's keeping us doing the work, and not necessarily having to regurgitate that for people to understand, because it may not be easy to understand. So then we have our outputs. So these we can frame as our scenes or our events. These are really our trainings, our campaigns, our events, our outreach. These are the important activities that we're doing, right? But they're really more of the setup than they are the story behind it, right? So we may say, um, you know, we held 4 town halls, right? And end it there. Or we had a community event and 300 people attended, and then we put a period there, right? So that doesn't really create the story. It doesn't explain why those town halls mattered. It doesn't explain who showed up, what answers were, what questions were asked, what felt different after people left the room, right? So just because our activities happen, it doesn't mean that people understand why it happened or why it mattered to the people or the community. So lastly, we get to our outcomes and our metrics. So we have those, but those are really our proof, and those still need interpretation. So we may think about it as awareness increased, behavior shifted, relationship strengthened, trust built. Really kind of thinking that the numbers alone don't tell what had really changed. We may say a 15% increase in perception of harm. but that may not really mean much unless we explain what that actually looks like for families or youth or our community. So this is where our prevention impact really starts to become visible, using some of those protective factor languages, or really kind of explaining what the outcomes and metrics really mean as results. So before we get to our next part, we have another poll. Um, so kind of given what we know in the prevention field, which feels the hardest to explain to people outside of the prevention field? And I think that this is really important because, again, we have a certain language, we have a certain, the science behind prevention. But when it really comes to explaining it to people that are not so familiar with it, maybe they're partners, maybe they're the general public, we kind of want to know what feels the hardest to explain.
Here we go. All of the above is the winner on this
All of the above.
mainly.
I had a feeling that would be the case.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think the others, the one that were selected more individually, the impact doesn't show up immediately. We will kind of talk about, and then how to use that piece of it, that there's so much in between from before we get that big impact data piece. And then also, our data doesn't tell the full story. That is 100% true. And that's why we're going to kind of show you how to go beyond just that data point. So, going off of that, what is missing exactly to that point? So when we are talking about storytelling, data needs interpretation. Our outcomes explain, the activity, but we have to kind of go beyond that, right? So, and that's something that poll really highlighted, that our data isn't wrong and it's not incomplete on its own, but really we need to say, have the data tell us that something else happened, and why did it matter? So, one of the things that our data typically is missing is characters, right? So, every prevention activity or outcome happens to somebody. So, who experienced this? Who changed from it? Who benefited from it, right? So, this is the point of entry for all of our audiences, right? They're not a number anymore on a data point. They are the actual people behind the impact. So we're not looking for a dramatic story, but we're looking for that human anchor, that human emotional element to it, right? Because we don't have to name our characters. We don't have to say, oh, Charisse experienced this, right? We can group them. It can be a group of parents, a classroom, a neighborhood, a community over time, right? We can sort of frame it as in a population level aspect without naming somebody, but without saying who benefited or who had some sort of interaction with the activity, or with the as a part of the data. They're just numbers on a spreadsheet essentially, or in a data report. So this is where we have to start kind of shifting our focus and thinking about the audiences that we serve. um, and then, thinking about ethical prevention storytelling, which we're going to kind of weave into this workshop a little bit. It really, when we're thinking about characters, just also being mindful that we can talk about the people in our community anonymously, collectively, and at a community level. There are moments where you can use somebody's as a character in your storytelling, but we don't always have to do that, especially if maybe we don't know the person, or it's a few days, a few weeks later, and you still want to tell a story about something that happened. So once we identify our characters, that's where the rest of our story starts to really take shape.
Thank you. So So now we'll move into measurable outcomes, and this is where we start to take things that are on a micro level and condense them down to micro. So we want to start with the community as a whole first and ask the question, in what ways was a neighborhood or a community positively impact? And then you zoom in on the population you serve. What changed for the people directly connected to your work? And then you want to look at relationships where trust, partnerships, and community connections strengthened with this activity or this experience. And then we end it with the individual. Are the stories that show growth, healing, or changed behavior evident, right? And if you can trace the impact from community to people, and then a person, that's a measurable win. So on the next slide, we have a visual. It's kind of an upside down pyramid, but you can also think of this as a funnel, right? So you've got the neighborhood and community, the large community, and then it brings it down to that micro level. So the people you serve, forming that trust and connection with relationships where you can find a lot of gems there, and then down to the person and that person potentially representing the outcomes. We can go on to the next slide. All right.
So as
And this
yep,
is Anna. Yep. Okay.
as Cherie said, you know, looking from the macro to the micro, and a lot of the times in prevention work, we are looking for that population level change. So kind of shifting it to that individual experience, and why that looks different. So again, we know that prevention impact takes sometimes years to be able to show in a data point, right? So when we look at our rates, our trends, our long-term change, that's all really important. And that's how we know prevention works, right? Especially from what we're taught from a prevention science lens. But for storytelling, it really helps to reframe what we mean by success. So, kind of looking at what can we do now, even if we don't have that trend data, or it takes years, you know, sometimes 10, 20 years to get that trend data. Um, Population level change doesn't happen all at once, and we know that. So that's where we can start to sort of look from that macro to the micro of individual experiences, looking for a sequence of changes that may make the outcome possible. So we also know that individual experiences is really where the first shift starts. You know, and that's kind of where those individual moments can be our early signs of success, and it can show early signs that something in the environment is changing, or something in the behavior is changing, or a norm is changing. So we just have to really look for those, and those are the hardest things to look for. um, but it is also important to kind of think about them as critical benchmarks when we're talking about long-term prevention. So making the invisible visible, right? Again, prevention impact, we're rooted in our conditions and our behaviors and our root causes. And especially from a strategic prevention framework perspective, our impact is really measured on how well we address risk and protective factors. It's really the root causes that shape behavior over time. Those are kind of the things that we're trying to accomplish when we're trying to decrease or increase our data. But stories need a clear so what factor, right? And sometimes that may not be so evident. So, and it's not about how many flyers we handed out or how many events we had. It's really about what changed because of those activities and those strategies that we're doing. So, thinking about it as a strategic staging, that really helps bridge the gap, kind of getting out of that macro population level change into starting to look at individuals. So, it's very kind of can go basic, but starting with what people can see or feel, right? Thinking about short term changes in knowledge, attitudes, or skills. So every time that you conduct an activity or have an event, or maybe put out um, a talking tips for parents, right? Looking for those short term changes. Maybe it's somebody says something on social media, or someone says something to you in person, or they make a comment, oh, I saw this flyer, or I saw this posting. Or, you know, maybe it's after a QPR training. You know, you hear down the line, oh, I use QPR. You know, I had a friend in crisis. So kind of looking for those. Now, they're not always going to be so easy to come by, but the more aware we are of them, the easier it is to pick them out. Because as people in the community, we're often having conversations with our partners. We're having conversations with our parents, our community members. So as long as we are aware of some of the things that we're looking for, they're much easier to come by. And you'd be surprised how often it actually really does happen if you start looking for them. And then kind of trying to connect it back to our root cause. So this is where our knowledge and our expertise really comes into play, because you may have a community member that said, oh, that was really great, I learned XYZ. Well, now as prevention professionals, knowing the science behind it, how can we connect that back to a root cause to really showcase the change that occurred? And landing on why it matters for individuals in the community. Typically, when people tell you something, a positive or a story, that's what impacted them. So go with that, right? So, again, it may be like, well, maybe that wasn't the original intent of our presentation or our workshop or our event, but that's what somebody walked away with. And don't be afraid to use that as a success story, because, you know, we all experience things differently, and it may have been something that you didn't intend to teach, or a skill you didn't intend to teach, and that's maybe something someone got out of it. So just kind of being very mindful when we're talking to people and sort of hearing what they're saying.
Yes, and so now we're going to talk about how, we think about in prevention, we think about the data, these are points, right? But now we move into thinking about data as a story, and now we are looking at the process, as opposed to just the numbers and just the point. And so this is where we'll go ahead and shift a little bit with our poll, our next
Yeah.
poll.
So again, kind of thinking about which of these tools do you already have access to. I know a lot of these, but I just wanted to kind of do a check-in point. Um, so what tools, reports, data collected, events, trainings, community conversations, participant feedback, informal moments or quotes, or all of the above? Oh, you can actually, I'm sorry, select as many as apply.
Have it.
Okay. All right. So, a big majority reports data collected, events or trainings. No surprise there. But I'm actually really glad to see that community conversations, participant feedback, and informal moments or quotes are pretty high, over 50%. So that is really great, because that's really important. They're all great tools that we already have access to. So as I had mentioned in the last slide, one of our biggest myths about storytelling is that we need something extra, right? We need this special story or the special person or the special moment to occur. And the reality is we don't. We already have the tools. We have the reports, we have the evaluations, the dashboards, we have records of change. We have activities that matter, we have documentation, feedback, and really the ones that sh- we can shift to sort of pay more attention to are those everyday conversations and that feedback, whether it's formal or informal, that we hear. So, just kind of reiterating, if it's in your work plan, it's probably a story, you just haven't framed it yet. And so, one of our biggest mistakes that we make is to treat our data and our stories separately, right? So, just because we have a metric, we feel like we need something else to happen to have a story to tell. And realistically, every line in your report or in your data is an outline to a story. It's really just kind of looking at it from a individual lens, a person lens, and emotional lens. So we wanted to give some examples, just because we know that it could be really difficult to sort of look at metrics and then say, well, how do I create a story out of this? So we kind of wanted to give a couple very basic examples. So example one, and this is something that you may be collecting in your data reports, distributing 500 lock boxes, right? It may be accurate, but it doesn't really tell people what they should care about, right? So thinking about the narrative, what's the story? Well, you can frame it around 500 families just close the easiest door to prescription drug misuse in their home. So now we're starting to shift from, okay, we gave out lock boxes to why are we giving out lock boxes? And if you can notice in the story, we're not really saying we gave out lock boxes. We're just saying that the outcome was this. We don't have to necessarily highlight what did we do. We don't have to say we gave out 500 lock boxes. We just say that here is the ripple effect of giving out those boxes. And then the second one, so our outcome is passing a social host ordinance. What is the story behind it? We may not have to say that a law or an ordinance was passed. We could just say our town sent a clear signal. The cool parent who provides alcohol is now held an accountable neighbor, right? So you're just kind of reshaping it. You're reframing it. It's the same fact. It's just framed a little differently. And we understand what changed. And then our last one is around recruiting 3 new sector representatives. So this may be new people sitting at your table or having some capacity building occur in your coalition or your organization. So what could be the story behind it? The circle of protection grew. We now have business, faith, law enforcement at the same table. And that really shows that our coalition got stronger, not just bigger, right? You're adding in the sectors. You're not just saying, oh, we have 3 new sectors. We have 3 new people. You're really just showing what is the bigger impact that now those 3 individuals are sitting at the table. So we're just sort of translating what that metric represents to someone who may not be privy to kind of what the prevention lingo is or what prevention science is. So a couple more examples. So getting comfortable with translating those individual metrics. Our next step is sort of understanding how a single story can unfold over time. So and that's really important to know that it is a progression. Not really, we don't have to treat every single metric as an individual story. We can really take one metric, or if we're doing sort of a longer term outcome, like in this example, a campaign, we can sort of take that progression, and that's the story that we frame around it. So, for example, if the activity is we ran a social media campaign, the output being reaching 5,000 local residents with that campaign, and the outcome was we had 200 click downloads on our talk toolkit on our website based on the campaign, right? So those are all individual things that may have occurred, say in a couple weeks and a couple months over time. Now let's frame that into more of a narrative story translation. So we can say we started a conversation reaching 5,000 of our neighbors, and now 200 more dinner tables are having conversations tonight because parents have the tools to talk to their kids. So you can sort of see the difference in how that story comes across than just saying we ran a social media campaign, we had say 5,000 impressions and 200 downloads from our website, right? You're really showing the human element to what does that mean? What is the ripple effect of that activity? The social media campaign is just the medium of how we're doing something, and then we always have sort of the why at the end. So using that as the impact. Something else that I really wanted to emphasize here too is one of the things that's really important, especially when we do think about ethics and storytelling, is it's really the same data. It's not exaggerated. It's not necessarily adding any drama to it. It's really just explaining what that data looks like and what it represents in real life and in people's daily lives.
So again, with reframing, we're going from analytical to now thinking with our emotional brain when we're telling the stories. We want to tap into emotion, because that's what really helps us to appreciate what's happening, and for the audience to feel those outcomes. It helps it to resonate a lot more. And of course, it connects back to our mission.
Yeah, so kind of, and we have sort of talked about this going beyond our activities. So again, typically in our prevention storytelling, we stop at the output. So we may say things like, we held a health fair and 300 people attended. And that's not necessarily wrong. Just for a story component, it may feel incomplete. So to get to the outcome, asking a question like, well, what is different for those 300 people now that they've left the health fair? And that's kind of where our outcomes really develop that emotional piece outside of the analytical. Um, and strong stories go beyond activities. So, getting feedback from participants, partners, coalition members, capturing candid moments, getting those questions asked, those reflections shared, any shifts you observe, and having conversations that surface individuals' experience and meaning. And I did want to give an example here because something that, as Sharice and I were putting this presentation together, it really kind of got me thinking back into my local coalition work, right? And especially in this one where even being a prevention specialist or experiencing the activities or sort of the events that maybe the coalition is putting on, as a whether you're the prevention specialist or you are the coordinator or you're even just there as a partner to support another organization, do not take for granted your own experiences in the work as well, because and I wanted to share this example because as when I was the prevention coordinator working in Stratford, we had run a annual freshman forum. And being that this program was running on, I was in the back, very, very back of the auditorium at one of the high schools. And as one of our lived experience presenters were giving their story, I saw a parent, a dad, put his arm around his son at the time, right? And out of anything that occurred that day, whether it was the stresses or anything, that was the moment that I remember and it really stuck with me. And that was an observation that I had made. And again, kind of thinking about that. So when you are in these moments in the community, using your own observations can also tell a story, right? Because that may not have I didn't talk to that family, I didn't talk to those, but that was a clear visual observation of a change occurring, right? Something was resonating with that family and that parent to have a body language change, right, with their child. So I just really wanted to emphasize that because sometimes we as the professionals are experiencing the shift. And so we can use that in a story as well.
Okay, so I wanted to share an example of this was a time when I was working as a case manager. I worked for a workforce development program, and we had a prevention workshop that was conducted, and the majority of the participants in this program were part of a recovery program or a reentry program. And this one individual, he was on my caseload. He participated in this workshop and found so much benefit from in the workshop. He was able to see his blood pressure. He found out that he had really high blood pressure. It motivated him to set up all of his doctor's appointments on his own, which, of course, we were already trying to work on a plan for that, but it just gave him more fire to get it done sooner. And he learned how to make smoothies, and he took this newfound passion for his health back to the recovery home that sober home he was living in at the time, and he started making smoothies with the other individuals in that home. And so fast forward 3 years later, I run into Mr. Charlie, and he's thriving, he's doing really well, and he's accomplishing a lot of the goals that he wanted to accomplish, and his health is in peak shape. Um, not that not that the organization can take complete credit for all of the great work that he did, but there is certainly a story there. So if we go to the next slide, I want you to think about what happens if you don't capture any of that story. I was very limited in what I could do as a case manager at the time with sharing, too much. I wasn't part of the development team. I did communicate, with them about his story, but of course it fell on deaf ears, right? And so this was a missed opportunity. We could have showed how this prevention workshop and workshops like these can be extremely helpful for our populations. And so some of the missed opportunities were the impact was real, but it was treated as invisible, right? There was no system that existed to capture individual stories. I was, just a case manager, but if everybody had the mindset of let's look for story opportunities, we would have a nice collection of stories that we could then use in the future for different things. The connection between the wellness initiative, that intent, and the long-term recovery impact was never documented, right? So again, missed opportunities. These are opportunities that are sitting right on the table. And so the key takeaway here is that this wasn't a failure of the program, but it was a huge missed opportunity to recognize, name, and share impact that was already happening. So we can go on to the next slide. Oh, I think because it has the same title, we can go back one, I think. Nope, it's me. You can go on to the next one. All right. So we would want to emphasize this is what we could have done. We would want to emphasize that Mr. Charlie didn't do this alone. That the environment, the staff, relationships, shared learning made space for the change. And we would want to honor time as part of that impact. I think, Mark, you made a comment about that too, in recovery, that time, that being part of the story is also very important. 3 years of sobriety isn't a moment. It's a time held by community, consistency, and access to simple tools. You want to let the story invite reflection, not, just applause, and really let it sink in and marinate what this did for this individual. And then ask funders in the community how many Mr. Charlies exist whose stories were never captured, right? So, and I'm saying Mr. Charlie, that's not his actual name. I'm just, sharing his story without sharing too many details about his personal journey. And so here we have the formula. Our prevention story formula. So you'd want to introduce the individual, of course, with their permission, group or data. Prioritize process. So we're shifting again from thinking about just data points to now process the activities, the quotes, the experiences, the changes, the behavior changes. All of these are goals. Having a clear beginning, middle, and ends. That is the main. These are the main components of storytelling. Clear beginning, clear middle, clear end. Having a human element, there's emotion. What is the benefit, the care, and the movement involved? And then having reflection, meaning, and significance. And then, of course, ethics. So here's a story structure for prevention impact work towards. You want to make it simple, human, and impactful. In a moment, we'll go into the report to ripple to show how we can take a data point and create a story and then have it ripple. And then you want to identify the goal it supports, connect to vision and mission, always going back to your vision and mission, your why, and craft a short narrative showing the impact. All right, so here we have the examples here. We have the data outcome, which would be, for example, it's just your boring output, right? The simple data. And then the story is that human signal and the leading indicator. And then the ripple effect or the ripple impact is how does this tie into your mission and intent? What does that small moment matter for your long-term goal?
Yeah, so also, and I had thrown in the chat our prevention checklist PDF. So if you are able to download that, I know you'll get it at the end. But on page 2, we sort of have this ripple impact 1, 2, 3, so to say, as a sort of template for you. So I just wanted to say that you will have that in the PDF that we give you.
And then we can go to the next slide. So the data outcome, 12 coalition meetings, right? Now turning that into a story. At the third meeting, the chief of police stopped sitting by the door and moved to the center of the table. Might seem like a small thing, but that is storytelling. There's something about that that moves us, that tells us that there was a shift in his thinking and in his feeling. So that impacts us. We can relate to that. That resonates for us. The ripple impact, the signal of increased sector buy-in is the foundation for the policy changes we need in 2026. So now we can see the big picture just by the small moment. We can move on to the next one. And then another example would be 1,000 social media impressions. Okay, that's great. You had 1,000 social media impressions, but what's the story behind that? The story is a parent comment, a story that could go along with this to expound on this is a parent commented, "I never thought about it that way," on our post about brain development, right? So them saying that as a comment, that within itself is actually a story. And then you have the ripple impact. This is a leading indicator of a shift of parental norms, which is the first step towards reducing access to substances at home. So now we see the much bigger ripple or the bigger effect. Next slide. So here's where at the beginning, we asked you to come with an outcome or a data point that you're thinking about for your own organization. So here's where you can take a moment to maybe write that down and now see if you can craft a story or find a small moment in that that you think would resonate for individuals, and then think about the ripple effect. So for the story part, let me go back. What is one thing you heard or saw during that activity? And then the ripple impact, how does this tie into your mission and intent? What does that small moment matter for your long-term goal?
Yeah, so we're going to give everyone probably about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes to kind of think about this, jot it down. And if you are comfortable sharing, we would love for someone to share their process from their outcome, their story, and their ripple impact, just so that we can, um, you know, have some other examples to work off of. So I mean, hopefully we get one or two at least. So please take this time to sort of work through this.
Now's a good time to see if anyone has anything that they'd like to share. We'd love to hear some other voices. That would be great.
If
Yes,
anybody-
please unmute. No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say, feel free to just come off mute or raise your hand using your tools at the bottom of the Zoom sheet to raise your hand. Oh, Anna would like to go ahead, Anna.
Hi, it's Anna, and I appreciate the time to be here today. And I was looking at, I was asked to return to an event as a vendor and bring memorial quilts because of the person that was holding the event lost her fiance. He was a Hispanic male. He was on our quilt. He was the first person of color. And in the process, in the second year of showing and displaying the quilt and making information and resources available, I was approached by a guy. He was, just talking it up, and he says, there's no Black people on your quilt. I said, I am absolutely aware of the fact that there is nobody on our quilt of color other than, and then I introduced him into Susan's fiance. And I said, we've done what we can, and I continue to learn, and I'm open to finding out how to better represent and diversify who's represented on our quilt. How can I do that? That there's differences that I'm unaware of culturally on how to do that. So it opened up a great dialogue. I made sure that he knew who I was and my intentions with the organization, where he can find our information and be attentive to our next event opportunity. And this is with bereavement, grief, and loss side of things, but nonetheless, it's still not being represented on the people that are passing, let alone the greater longevity of those affected. And so he has not contacted me yet, but our information for our next one is in Watertown on March 7th. And I want, really, I'm not sure how, but want to make sure that opportunities present. I'm not sure the whole frame of your questions, but I just wanted to say that I knew it made a difference, but it opened for a conversation that I'm fully aware of isn't being strongly represented. And I really would be open to any conversation that would help build that story, because I will say this same thing at any podium, that it's different culturally when it comes to mental health and substance use in particular, on how to open the dialogue and an understanding I don't have. So, I mean, I have my own challenges as a brown Armenian female, or at least half of me is. I know that there are, there's some things there that aren't said or are able to be talked about. So that was the story. So I think it opened up dialogue, and I think the opportunity presented itself, and I commended him on his courage for making that statement and opening the conversation. So I think there was a lot of different things that I can use, reframe, and make a story about to impact further opportunities at a podium or at our next Memorial Quilt Square project, because I want to keep talking about people, because they were so much more than what it was that affected them. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that. Yes, there's definitely a lot there. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about the potential stories that comes out of that story, right? I feel like and I don't want to overshadow Anna, because there's some things that we will cover in the upcoming slides about ways to capture that. But certainly there are several things that can be done with that story beyond the podium, and used to share it. Does anyone else want to share?
I can share mine. So Steps Youth Council launched a campaign called It's Not Easy to Talk to Your Kids, where they encourage parents to have proactive conversations about family rules and boundaries related to substance use with their teens. And so we did 700 pizza box stickers. So thinking about how to turn that into a story, I'm thinking now more families are sharing more than just a slice of pizza at the kitchen table. They're also sharing conversation. And then the ripple effect is that, that's an indication of a change in family norms. And that will hopefully also change like access to alcohol at home.
Yes, awesome. That's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ramona?
Ramona, you would like to,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Hi, we're currently doing a grant that's focusing on giving education on overdose prevention naloxone with first responders. Now, obviously, they know how to give these substances. That's not the issue. What we're trying to do is identify any personal biases they have, address the stigma of addiction, and focus a little bit on their compassion fatigue, having to deal with the population so frequently. So we've had some good success with our data showing that they've appreciated the training. But the story is I had one person come up to me and say, I never saw myself as being someone that was really being affected by the job. But after all these years of doing this, I do identify that I've had certain thoughts towards people that repeatedly use. And I've changed now and understand more about harm reduction. So that was the first win. But the second part was that this person said to me that they realized that they have been using alcohol to numb themselves in dealing with this, and they enter treatment. So
Wow.
I obviously can't share this person's, name or anything like that, especially because it is something legally
Right.
being in the field. But honestly, that to me was right there. We helped one person that it was just mind blowing for me. So I
Oh
would
my
love to
goodness.
share that somehow.
Oh, wow. You're
Yeah.
making my wheels turn. So
Yeah.
many. Yeah, there's a lot there. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a great example.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I think we have time maybe for one more and then we can go to the next slide. Lots of hearts coming through, which is great.
I, I'd just be willing to share something, Karen from the Wyndham Prevention Coalition. So we have a youth leadership council. We meet a couple times a month in the evenings, and we also, as a spur off to that, we had I want to say a year and a half ago, one of the parents of the group saying, I would love to get a parent group started too. So we now, and so I'm really going to try and condense this, but so now we have a group of parents, and it's mostly the parents of our youth council members who attend. So once a month on the same Thursday night that their youth are there, we meet with the parents in a different room, so splitting up staff. And we have some folks from another school, Family Resource Center too, who have just started coming. But one of the things I just want to share that just happened a couple of weeks ago at our meeting was we're in the process of planning a wellness fair for the spring, and just talking about different ideas for a later afternoon activity of fun things that families could do with their kids, ways to grow that bonding with one another. And so a conversation got started about also about people that impacted them in their lives when they were teenagers and growing up, or ways or different things in their own relationships with their kids. And the stories that they started sharing were just so heartfelt. And I felt like by the end of that evening, um, parents just started opening up, and they started sharing about ideas of little workshops they'd be willing to offer. Oh, I'd like to teach some other parents maybe some crocheting, or a dad says, oh, I do sometimes as a family we do things with making making planters out of recycled soda bottles. And a woman at the table goes, oh, I work at a plant store, I bet we could get them to donate. And all this exchange started going on. Well, it has just blossomed, and you can see the excitement within the group. And now that excitement has sort of filtered over into the coalition in terms of ideas that we're planning, but also within their kids, because then they're sharing more of this with their kids, about them getting excited about being part of this fair that we'll all be involved in. And so I just think, so for the beginning, the data outcome, the whole thing of youth and parent communication, right? So we have some of those, survey data, just, how we know the importance of how important it is for youth to feel like they can go to their parents when they're feeling stressed, when they're concerned of a friend. And so, so taking that and then doing these kinds of stories, and then the ripple impact of, I can now at the coalition, you see all of these people of all of our different sector members getting so excited from what they're hearing from the parents, what they're hearing back, as my as Riley and Leah are reporting what they're doing with the youth council and blending it together. So anyway, just find a way to create that into the storytelling that we're doing in data.
Gold. This is such gold. There's so much that could be done with that and with the momentum. So now that there's all this momentum, this is where you can capture all of these moments in quotes from the parents from these meetings. I love this example. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much that could be done with that. And so we'll get into now the how. Some of us may be tech savvy or some of us not so much, but we really try to make this accessible for folks and digestible. So hopefully you'll find this to be helpful in the upcoming slides.
So I just wanted to kind of go off of, I know Mark had put in the chat box
Oh
to
yeah,
challenge
let's
us
go.
to
Mhm.
share our impact on this session. So I kind of started just to show that, I mean, it is possible. It does need some framing, but so thinking about this training and using this framework, so the data outcome, I kind of just put 30 prevention professionals are attending a workshop on storytelling for impact. The story. So one of the things that we heard or saw in this activity or this piece of the training really highlights that um, those that are here, as a trainer, starting to see the shift of how people are starting to describe their work, right? And starting to name their observations and, start saying what they've experienced, what they saw, what people have told them. And then the ripple impact being that our intent was really to make storytelling less, or I guess less daunting, less, having professionals not be so afraid of storytelling, and being comfortable with doing so. So the ripple effect being that hopefully those that are in this training today feel more comfortable pushing their metrics into more meaning. So taking their data and translating it into a story.
And
How's
something
that?
special, yes, and something special just happened. The minute individuals started sharing stories, we got emojis, right? We got reactions, we got hearts, we got the celebration emoji, right? So that shows that storytelling is really impactful and it resonates for people. It makes them feel something. So we had a shift in emotion right on the call. So that's great too. We can go on to our next slide. All right. So plain language is king in this arena. The more plain language we can use, the better. We want to reach wider audiences. And I think it was Anna that made this point that, the audience really matters. Yes, of course. But the more plain we can make the language, the better, so that people are able to receive the story right away, right? They don't have to think about it or Google in the dictionary, right? And we use a lot of jargon in prevention, in recovery, in human services that is really foreign, to the average person sometimes. So just taking that into consideration. And then we want to start with the person. Who is the story about? What is their day-to-day reality? Getting that granular, thinking that way. Name the exposure, what prevention tools, conversations, and supports were introduced. Show the shift, what changed in awareness, behavior, or mindset. Highlight the protective factor, right? What stuck and supported health over time? And then land on the outcome. What is different now for the person and the community because of this effort? And then here's just the ultra short version, the six question story checklist. Who is this for? What is this happening for? What did they encounter? What changed? And what protective factor grew? Okay, so in a nutshell, this is how we want to think about it. The who, what, where, or just the who, what. All right, your Midas touch. This is probably my favorite aspect of this because this is all about what makes you, your organization, the stories that you captured unique. This is a strong selling point. So what you want to think about what glittered. In our session today, for me, what glittered was the reactions, right? Seeing those emojis. So we were able to effectively have individuals share something that was personal happening in their organizations. What did you do that felt distinctly yours? Where did people lean in, stay present, and open up? What moments felt small but had impact? Again, back to Anna's story about the father's arm around his son. How did your approach make learning feel human and accessible? What about the way you showed up made the work stick? What does the data reflect about your impact and numbers, and how can that be shown physically? Most of us are visual creatures, right? So wanting to be able to see that and show that. Next slide. So intent versus impact. In the context of this presentation and storytelling and prevention, we want to think about things in this way. What you set out to do versus what opportunities actually opened up. So the intent is the prevention goal you started with. So maybe it's a program, an initiative, training, or conversation you plan to deliver. And then the impact would be what the work created or sparked, how it landed, and the outcome. So was there a new awareness or understanding, a space for learning or honest dialogue, opportunities to practice healthier behaviors, or shifts in mindset, confidence, or readiness for change, or all of them? Could have been a mix of all of them. And impact isn't just the activity, it's what people walk away with. So that's how you know you were being impactful, if they were able to walk away with something. And what became possible because this work existed? What did you start? Next slide. So here's just a couple of visuals just to help let this sink in about the Midas touch. What was unique? What were the highlights? Small, impactful moments. Can you collect those? Can you brainstorm on those? Really small, because they can have a much bigger punch. What was human about it? Think about the human element of it. And then what of this could last a long time? What could leave an impression for a long time? Next slide.
So then before we share stories, pausing to really think about how we're sharing them. So again, we are still hold a certain level of responsibility. And the way that we tell our stories can either build trust or potentially cause harm if we're not intentional. So we did want to kind of ground this in our prevention ethics. So sort of just things to consider. And on your 2-page or PDF that I had uploaded, there is a little checklist on just, are you, being ethical in your prevention storytelling? So again, we don't want to do harm. We know that, when we are using people, especially to tell stories, we're not re-traumatizing, we're not exposing communities, and we're not turning lived experience into something sensational, right? I think a lot of the times we use lived experience to really show that connection and show the success or the positives, but there is also a fine way of, or there's an art to telling story, especially when we're using lived experience. Consent and autonomy. So stories, if you are using someone, you can, sharing, asking permission, but also thinking about, as I had said earlier, using groups of people, more of that population base to tell a story. So it may not, because you may not have consent from someone to share one little thing from what you saw or heard. Dignity and respect, so avoiding deficit or crisis only narratives. Really showing centering around strength based growth and humanity. Equity and fairness, so really providing context so stories don't feel like they're reinforcing stereotypes or blaming individuals or blaming systematic issues. And that's really important because, we don't want to show blame that shapes behavior. We really want it to be centered around sort of experience. And then finally, accuracy and integrity. So we don't want to exaggerate our outcomes or performance for impact, especially when it comes to funding. We do want to say, oh, we did all this great work, but really the credibility depends on how we tell the story and really being truthful in how we tell the story. Something that um, you know, maybe an event maybe didn't get as many people to, maybe you held a community forum and only 3 parents showed up. That isn't a it isn't it's not showing failure, but now using those 3 people and what can you really get out of those 3 people? What story can come out of it to show that there was an impact? Yes, maybe the number was low, but that doesn't mean that those 3 people that showed up didn't get something really great out of it. So just being really mindful that just because we may feel like something may have not gone as well as we had hoped doesn't mean that there isn't an impactful story in there. So we wanted to do a quick check-in because we do have kind of moving into our final phase of our presentation. I just wanted to check in. Does anyone, maybe we'll do a 5-minute break before we plow through the end of our presentation.
All right, why don't we come back around 11:25 and we'll get started maybe around 11:26. Does that sound okay? Good?
Sounds great.
All right, everybody, take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thank you. Hey, it's a little bit after 11:26. Do you want to get started, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, kind of our final piece in our presentation or workshop today is we wanted to give another example of sort of um, telling something four different ways. So, one of the things that we really want to emphasize is that you don't need four different stories. And a lot of the times, especially in marketing, you'll hear that people really don't remember something unless they see it 10 plus times, right? Like, so when we're thinking about billboards or doing other marketing visuals, they typically say that it takes us multiple times of seeing something to remember it and to understand it. So, the same kind of goes with storytelling. However, you can do it in different ways. One of the things that's really important in storytelling too is that different things resonate with different people. So these are ways that you can tell the same story in different ways and using different mediums depending on where you decide to post it. So it's not necessarily about doing more work, but it's really about letting the same story travel, and that's really similar to, like I said, in that marketing realm of letting something be seen multiple times. So starting with social media. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever social media platform that you use, using those is really great way to get information and stories out. They may be simple from a photo, thanking partners, a short story from that day. It may include a conversation or a quote with somebody that maybe stuck with you. It doesn't have to explain anything, but it can really make people pause and feel connected. And when we think about social media, it's really, especially in today's society, it's really a way that most people feel connected to organizations and to other people. It is through social media. So that is really one of our best vehicles to storytell and have that human and connection element. Another piece is using newsletters or blogs. So that just gives us a little bit more room. This is where we can really be educational, reinforcing our vision and mission. It can be a little longer than your typical social media post, and it's where you could really just slow down but still feel approachable. A lot of the times, our newsletters or our blogs are the audience is pretty standard, right? So it may be the same people getting your e-newsletter. It may be someone checking your website on the regular. So, we may have a little bit of a better relationship with the people reading our blogs and newsletters than maybe just in general the community at large. Then going into our press releases, so this also gives us a lot of room to still tell a story, but they may be a little bit more formal. So highlighting the community, naming our intent, using quotes to really bring our information to life. And the goal here is credibility and clarity, not necessarily emotion for emotion's sake, but we can still tell a story even if we have to be a little bit more formal for the media.
Anna?
And then last, oh,
Anna, the slides
yes.
are not showing, just so you know.
What do you mean?
They're not, I think you have to reshare. The PowerPoint doesn't show.
Oh,
Oh, I can see them.
You'll see the slides.
You can? On my end, they don't show for some reason.
I can't see them either.
Okay,
okay, let me try again. Let me just reshare. Not a
sorry
problem.
about that.
No, you're good. Um, okay. How about now?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Perfect. So lastly, there's video. So again, videos can feel very intimidating for people, but they don't have to be fancy. They can be longer. They could be really short, 5 minutes or under a minute or less, even quick clips that help people see and hear the impact. And you can really add video anywhere. And it's something that Sharice will kind of get into because this is sort of the medium that we would highly recommend because it really does bring everything to life. So, for the sake of just showing for different ways to tell the same story, we chose a random single data point. So here we are going to be a part of ABC Coalition. So our data point is following ABC's coalition it's a lot of C's, ABC Coalition's Youth Vaping Prevention Community Forum, we saw that 68% of participating parents reported increased confidence in having conversations with their teen about vaping risks. So we may have gotten this data point from an evaluation. I'm going to go with that. We did an evaluation for assessing confidence levels, and that was our metric that we found. So again, in your prevention checklist PDF, another formula that you have is a one sentence formula. So, this is really to sort of using something very simple if you do not have the space to kind of show your output, your story, and your impact. So you can still do it in one sentence. So we have here our formula is when who encountered the prevention exposure or activity, it led to what shift, strengthening which protective factor, and resulting in what impact. So really, again, going back to that 6-story question checklist, that's really all that you need is to say who, what was it, what was the shift, what was the protective factor that grew, and essentially what was the impact. So we have an example here based off of our single data point. So when parents encountered a safe space to ask questions at the community forum, it increased confidence and strengthened communication skills with their teens, which is a key protective factor for youth to stay substance free. So you can kind of see here how we took that data point. We're not saying 68%. We're not making it overly complicated that probably only professionals would understand. We're really bringing it down to a community and a human level of just saying more parents are able to talk to their kids or feel comfortable talking to their kids. So we wanted to give a couple of examples because it really can look different depending on what you want to say. So we have here, I'm not going to necessarily read them all. You will have these slides so you can use these as an example, but you can even make it simpler and just say when parents encountered ABC Coalition's vaping prevention forum, it led to increased confidence, strengthening communication, and resulting in more prevention conversations at home. So this is sort of a formula where you can play around with, is it going to be very short and to the point and concise, or do we want to elaborate on some of the protective factors and some of the larger impact? So these are just a couple of different ways that you can say the same thing, depending on what tone you want to go with. And then lastly, looking at that ripple effect. So we do want to encourage that you always look for that ripple effect. So in this instance, it could be that this increased confidence is an early ripple effect of prevention. When parents feel equipped to talk openly, it creates conditions that support healthier decision making and reducing risk over time. One of the things I do want to stress on here is, if you are comfortable or you do use AI, these are really great prompts to put into something like AI, right? Because we don't expect after today that everyone's going to be an expert and know how to storytell or, but it's really about sort of using some of these formulas and some of these things to, maybe put that into a prompt and say, hey, we had a forum. This is my data. Here's my mission and vision. What's the ripple effect, right? So using tools like that are really great to kind of show you how to frame a story, maybe having a little bit more of a human element, maybe having a little bit of an emotional element to it. Those are all really great prompts to put in because we don't expect everyone to just know how to do this. It really is an art, and using tools like AI can really help get our minds to start thinking more emotionally and more human forward. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
So here are some examples here. So we've got Facebook. And so what we can do with Facebook is you see this example here on the right, there's a picture. So we get a visual right away, and then we get a bit of the story right there at the top. And so it creates a moment of feeling. It captures the moment and the immediate takeaway. Feels like one night, one room, one stat, short sentences to the point. It's emotion first. It matches how people experience events. So, this is a great way to share a story in a condensed way. We keep it brief, but still effective. Next slide. Oh, and can include a quote from a parent. I didn't see that there at the bottom. Yeah, so that's a great opportunity to put a quote from a parent. And then Instagram, a little bit similar, but there's other ways to approach this too by creating a carousel. So you can add words as an image, and then show that story in a condensed way yet again. So for example, here you see there on the right that purple box. After ABC's Coalition's Youth Vaping Forum, 68% of parents reported increased confidence having conversations with their child about vaping risks. And then you hit them with your point. That confidence matters, right? So these are emotion words that we're using. And then you see how that 68% and confidence is bold and yellow. It stands out. This is all part of storytelling, the visuals. Then you have the image there of the parent group, and you see the quote right on top of the image. I finally felt ready to talk with my child about vaping. This makes it personal. This makes it relatable. So you would insert a call to action. So always make sure you're referring back to your website or whatever source you want to send them to. Could be even a case study. To learn more, visit such and such. And then why this works is it captures the moment and there's an immediate takeaway. Feels like, again, one night, one room, and it matches how people experience events. And it's part of their feed, right? They're already scrolling on social media. Most of us are. And so it's really effective to get them thinking about this. Next slide. Then there's the blog or newsletter. So your story structure here would be the setting, the action, and the meaning. And you would use quotes. You would definitely want to fill this up with some quotes. So, for example, one parent expressed, I felt like I knew what to say and how to say it. You would want to include videos. You'd want to include pictures. You, of course, would not want to overwhelm it, but you want to have just enough so that people have a little bit to read and then they have something to see. So why this works, you talk about the why behind the outcome, walks readers through the story, makes the data more meaningful, and connects the activity to the outcome to long-term impact. And then we have a press release. This is where you really want to use your adjectives, right? So instead of just saying this event brought together parents and educators, you'd say brought together concerned parents, passionate educators, right? So you want to use emotion language here and really use your adjectives. So data quotes and mission coexist in a press release, models ethical storytelling. Of course, we wouldn't want to sensationalize it. We wouldn't want to treat it like a novel either, but want to make it so that it has that meaningful feel yet again, in that human feel. So why this works, it demonstrates accountability and community value. It uses mission language as justification, and the vision becomes the why, and positions the coalition as a steward of community health.
Yeah, and in this one you can see, typically in a press release, we may not know what media outlets this press release may get to. So,
Right.
using our vision and mission as sort of the ending anchor is really important, because this is now most likely to get to a general population that may not be aware that ABC Coalition even exists. So you really want to root it in your vision and mission at the end.
Always think about how you want to make them feel reading it.
Mhm.
And so we have an example here. I worked closely with this organization in Delaware, Impact Life. They're an incredible recovery organization. They provide all sorts of different programs for the recovery community. And so in this video, which we'll show in a moment, the CEO, we're using her voiceover to talk about what you're seeing in the video, but also she's tying it back to her mission. And so this can be really effective, and it's short. It's about 4-ish minutes. But we just wanted to give you a visual so you can see how this can work and be really effective.
Can you see that now?
If you,
Yep,
no, it's not playing, but if
No,
you
not
go,
yet.
okay.
Yeah,
It
I
might
just
need
did.
to start from the top because the red at the bottom is showing. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Great. Uh, I think we might need to turn the volume up a little.
So Impact Life was founded a few years back. We're actually getting ready to celebrate our 5-year anniversary in April. And with Impact, we started to fill the gaps during COVID. We recognized that our folks that were in active use and or in recovery were really struggling to access services. And so as the company provided services and started to grow, everywhere we saw gaps, we were like, okay, let's figure out a way to fill this. And that's really the premise of everything that we've developed and where we are now, right? Is we see a gap and we try and figure out a way to fill it. And that's been very successful for us. We have pregnancy and doula services now. We are starting primary care services. We have outpatient services, residential services. We have recovery housing. We have outreach, youth and family services. And all of those things, came about when we recognized the gap, or we were asked to partner with the state or other community-based organizations to fill a gap and a need. We were looking for an event that we could do in fall where it was nice outside, but it wasn't super hot, and we could educate people on wellness and prevention and how that ties in with recovery, right? Substance use disorder recovery, mental health awareness and things like that. So September's Recovery Month. And so we were like, it would be a great time to get everyone together, get people outside, get people moving, do some health screenings, and really just work on their mental wellness and give people coping skills and tools that they can use, especially if they're in recovery, early recovery, where they can learn how to kind of regulate their emotions a little bit better.
Dig deep and find something that we didn't even know we had. So being able to go through different challenges.
So for us, we're trying to create an event that's fun, but where people are also learning and able to, leave with some tools that can help them long-term in their recovery.
So the first thing you're gonna do is, inside of your globe planner, you're gonna put some soil at the bottom. So you have some little scoopers there.
So, we have the belief, right, that if people have access to services like this, or they learn how to regulate their emotions a little bit better, or they learn meditation, they learn coping skills, things like that, that they'll be able to better deal with all the things that life throws their way. Typically when people are using substances or they're emotionally dysregulated, they can become reactive to things that lead to relapse or use or self-harming behavior, right? So if we can teach people that, hey, like when this happens, here's something you can do, breath work, right? When you start to feel yourself getting anxious, when you feel your heart start to race, you can do box breathing, right? And that'll help regulate your emotions a little better. That way they can do it in the moment. They can stop, they can pause, they can take a deep breath, and they can learn things that hopefully will help regulate them so we can prevent a relapse and things of that nature.
So that was an example of how video can be used. And here are some notes about using video. So video really shows the impact and the why at the same time. People are more likely to stop and pay attention to a video. And of course, we know video rules social media now, right? So as you scroll, videos are constantly popping up. So it's something that would be valuable and helpful. Video lets people tell their story in their own words. Seeing people, real people, makes the data feel real. It definitely humanizes that data. And it can show how all generations connect and learn. Seeing familiar faces makes the message a little bit more trustworthy within communities as well. So, that's something to think about. And then video turns numbers into real, relatable experiences.
So we have our last poll. So after today, we just wanted to do a check-in pulse. What feels most doable after this morning?
Here we go.
And you can select as many as you would like. It's multiple choice.
Can you see the results?
Yep.
Well, all of the above is the winner, so
Awesome.
some more or less than others.
Awesome.
Noticing
I
it.
really like this noticing impact moments more intentionally. We have a good amount there, so glad to see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And also translating data into human emotion-centered stories. I think that's a really great one. That was surely our intent for today as well. So just sort of what we covered today, again, kind of going back to what is prevention storytelling, how our prevention impact work looks, how it can unfold over time and sort of often may seem invisible without those stories attached to it. How can we move from data to story, turning our reports, activities, and outcomes into narratives and sort of around people and ripple effects. Centering ethics in our storytelling, and then also how to apply these stories across different platforms or mediums. So as you saw kind of in the end, using one data point and framing it in a few different ways. We did want to open up for any Q&A.
Thank you, Anna
So-
and Sharice, very much for that presentation. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to share before we finish up today? Wanda. Thank you, Wanda. Wanda shares. Thank you, Anna and Sharice, for this informative session. Have a phenomenal rest of your day.
And please, like I said, Jen will send out the PowerPoint and also the prevention checklist. Please use those resources as you see fit in your prevention work. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to Sharice or myself, and Sharice will be more than happy to help you, be creative in your storytelling. That's for sure.
Sharice, any final comments?
Yes, I apologize. I was typing my email in the chat just in case anyone wanted to reach out. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us on this call. I hope that you took away some gems, and look forward to engaging with you further in the future.
Thank you both very much for this presentation today, and your time in helping us tell our important, impactful stories that I know everyone on this call does every day in their communities where they live and work. So thank you to everyone who came today as well. So we appreciate you. So with that, you get a few minutes back to your day. Thank you so much, everybody. Anna and then Teresa and I will hang on for just a minute. If in case anyone has anything, we'll stop recording now. But we thank you and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.